Hi, this is Filiberto Amati, and we're here today with another of our sessions on our research for the future of events. Ball on the court on my co-author Marco Bevolo, who's going to introduce our esteemed guest of today.
Well, thank you. Today we are very pleased and very honored to have Kitty Soudman, whom I know for longer than 20 years, as she established the visual trend analysis practice uh, for Asia Pacific in the Hong Kong headquarters studio of Philips Design. And in such capacity, we have been collaborating for a decade. Kitty enjoyed a brilliant career during that time and afterwards. And she's now calling in from Seattle in the United States. Kitty, would you like to very briefly tell us what is your current scope of activities and what is your area of interest?
Yeah, so I currently work as the Director of Color Material Finish and Product Sustainability at Sonos. I was a pioneer at each company that I joined to really set up color material finish and trend analysis. And my role today is really evolving into product sustainability as a new space. I think a really relevant space as we see the changes in the climate, and how we as designers have a opportunity and a responsibility to really go deeper into understanding how we can contribute to product sustainability and take a look at product life cycle, really understand how we're designing our products and making sure that we think about the impact that our products have on the planet. So that's really an area of expertise where I'm growing into, which I feel is really relevant in today's world.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as you mentioned, you have been involved, you are involved deeply in trend research, monitoring all the different directions where the future could bring us. It's a sector that historically has been working a lot on the basis of attending fairs, visiting cities, going to conferences, meeting people, collective work, let's say, very much. It's also a sector that has engaged over time with different ways of collaborating. And we heard from other respondents how workshops became digital, for example, in the last year. When it comes to business events, and I would like to really stress with you that I'm not thinking about business events as only a conference, but the entire range from an internal workshop that you used to hold with 10 people up to a design week, to a fair where you used to go for the purpose of getting insights, meeting people, networking, getting opinions. Do you think that after the pandemic crisis, we will be in a digital event world? Do you think we will go back to in-presence physical? Do you think we will experience something never seen before?
Yeah, it's really interesting as we start to come out of COVID and learn what worked well in the last 15 months and what didn't work well. So for the first time, actually, internally at Sonos, we had our design team offsite digitally or online, which I think for an internal get-together like that, there was definitely a sense of the importance of coming together as a team and having that socialization aspect of it as well. But at the same time, I think it saved cost, it saved, if you think about it from an environmental perspective, we didn't have to fly everybody into a location. So from a carbon emissions perspective, for example, you are actually contributing to sustainability in a way. And we made it work. I think what we discovered in the last 15 months is we weren't able to sit in the same room and be together as people. And we found digital tools. We work with Google Docs where we're building presentations together real time. We used a platform called Mito to really do whiteboarding and explore different ideas and sketch together. But there were also moments when we did have to get together, which was complicated because they only let so many people into an office space and you had to be masked up and all the COVID restrictions that came with that. But realistically, if you're working in a hardware design team, there are moments when prototypes come to the table and you have to review those prototypes together. And that was done in a hybrid way. So a minimal amount of people would come together to really lay out all the different prototypes. And then there would be mediators that would help us through Zoom on their phones. So we found digital ways to engage the people that couldn't be there to really participate in these hardware reviews. So I think what we've learned is that there does need to be a hybrid. Just transitioning outside of the workspace and thinking about conferences, just in the last 2 weeks, I have been involved in 3 conferences. So IDSA had a sustainability deep dive last week. This week, Green Biz Group had Circularity 21 for 3 days. And earlier in the month, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation also had an online conference. So that's actually been really interesting. And there are pros and cons to that. I think by having these conferences be digital or be online, you're actually able to reach a lot more people. So that has its benefits that, there is wider reach. But then it also has its limitations where I think the benefit of meeting people in person and just having that socialization aspect of it is really important. There's another organization that I'm board chair of, which is called BEST, Businesses Ending Slavery and Trafficking, where we're really looking at human trafficking and labor trafficking and putting a stop to the demand side. And we Zoomed for 15 months. And this week was the first time that we came together again as a board and just noticed like, oh my God, those human interactions are something that we crave and that we really missed. But we also had a conversation around the positives of doing things remote or via Zoom. And that it just offers more flexibility and it's easier there's no commuting to get to certain places. So I think to your question, Marco, are we going to move towards a digital way of working or back to an in-person way of working? Those conversations are happening right now at Sonos. Like, how do we go back to work? What will this look like? We know that this will change. And I think it is going to be a hybrid solution. I still think you need both, but I think COVID-19 has demonstrated that doing things remotely, doing things online has actually worked better than anyone could have expected. So those have been some really interesting learnings.
I think it's going to be just to make it's going to be a hybrid with a very strong digital component because of the environmental.
Yes, yeah, it is actually really interesting. What they discovered in 2020 is that the carbon emission footprint actually came down pretty significantly, not enough to really offset what we have to bring it down to lower the global temperature of 1.5 degrees Celsius. So that's interesting as well, that we didn't have airplanes, people weren't driving, people weren't traveling, and so that has certainly had. We have real data points now that demonstrate that being in lockdown or sitting in a pandemic has actually helped climate change and helped sustainability in a way, right? It's all interconnected. So there's benefits to that as well.
Filiberto?
Well, I would say the funny thing for me, as I remember last year, was the fact that from our window in the center of Warsaw in Poland, we could actually see animals strolling through the streets, because it was we didn't know they were even that close. You know,
Yes.
it's like for sure they went back in hiding.
Yeah.
My question to you is the following, because I think you have described a very clear picture, but what is your personal expectation? If you could choose, what kind of events would you want to have a physical contact, or occasions? It doesn't have to be a generic event. It could be a specific meeting versus all the other meetings. What do you prefer to have, physical, digital, or phygital?
Yeah.
What's the hybrid?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think internally at Sonos, like the hardware design meeting is an opportunity where all of us get together once a year. And that was a really difficult one to do by not being able to get together. So I do think, as part of our company culture and making sure that we also work on our team culture, it's important to come together. With these other conferences that I've been attending in the last 2 weeks, I think that if I had to be there in person, I don't know if I would have been able to go to all of them. So I do feel like I have much more access to information by being able to dial in, not needing to travel, do it in between my job. It doesn't impact my life as much. So I think for some of those larger conferences, it's actually been easier just to dial in, to work it into my schedule. And I think that the way that they're setting it up, even if I looked at the IDSA conference or Circularity 21, there are really interesting ways that they have networking groups where you can come together and have a conversation. And we've run workshops that way as well, through Zoom or webinar or other tools that allow you to kind of randomly get put into these virtual chat groups. And that, I feel like that actually works really well. So I think with some of these larger conferences, I've always felt really overwhelmed going to these very large conferences, and you're walking around and trying to navigate and find your way. And I've actually found it to be much easier online for things like that.
Are the purposes of those conferences content consumption or more networking?
I would say both. I also think it depends on what type of conference it is, right? If I think about the Milan Furniture Fair, that is very hands-on, and you're seeing products, touching products, and I feel like those types of conferences would be more difficult to do digitally. But I think with these conversations around moving to a circular economy and understanding what's happening with climate change and learning about product lifecycle tools, like those are conversations that I think are quite easy to have digitally. And I think, again, I think with the conference that I had this week, they have a couple of keynote speakers, and then in between they have sessions where you can join and socialize online with individuals. And I actually think that works really well. So I think it depends a little bit on the type of conference that it is. And I think my background is on the hardware side, right? So I think if you're really needing to touch and feel and have conversations around product design, there has to be some sort of hybrid thing. But I think, like, even at Sonos, the group that sits in Seattle is actually predominantly software. So I am one of 5 hardware people that sits in this city. Most of the hardware people sit in Santa Barbara and in Boston. And I think, for the software team, I'm really curious to see how the Seattle office will come back and how we do that, because there's a lot of people that do coding and a lot of people that don't really need access to physical things. So it makes me question what would
human
be,
interaction.
what would be the reason or the purpose of coming back together. I've also learned that just sitting in the Seattle office, I don't overlap with a lot of those roles that sit there, but just the things that I have learned through hallway conversations and meeting people that sit in really different skill sets than I do, you're learning a lot about each other, and you're bringing all of those different skill sets together, which I think has been really interesting. So I still think there's value in that hybrid situation. And we're talking about that at Sonos, like, what will our hybrid look like? We know that we're not going to go back the same way as we did before the pandemic. So I hope that helps answer your question to some extent.
What was the name of the conference you mentioned? Because you mentioned 2 or 3, but you spoke about one specific conference in the last bit.
Yeah, so the conference, the Circularity 21.
21.
It's by the Green Biz group. They're the one that organized it. Green Biz, GREENBIZ. And they're all using different digital tools. I personally felt that the IDSA conference was easier to navigate. It was definitely, I wasn't familiar with the tool that Green Biz used, so it was a little bit more difficult to figure out how to get into certain conference keynote conversations. But I think, as this becomes the new norm to some extent, you'll learn that pretty quickly.
Look, I have, from what you said, everything, I gathered that in a way, and I make it a bit extreme to see where the tipping point is.
Yeah.
It sounds like conferences can go on online, and they will work online. And but the internal teamwork and the internal team building might require more
hybrid, I would say.
Yeah, and therefore it feels a bit like all the aspects that are related to business networking, to matchmaking, or to building up leadership can go online. And what really matters is keeping the focus on internal events. Because I think
and I think, Marco, the internal events to me also connect directly back to company culture and team culture, right? And I think you need to foster that. Another conversation that we've been having internally is when you have younger designers, I think younger designers need people around them to help them grow, right? I think some of the younger designers that we've brought into the team over the pandemic, it's been difficult for them to be isolated and not get to know the rest of the team. So I think just for the health of a design team within an organization, and making sure that the team is set up in a way so that it can also grow and foster that growth, I think it is still important to have a hybrid situation where you bring the team together to really foster collaboration, and just foster that team spirit and the health of the team. I think that's
Well,
really critically important.
by young designers, you mean
Designers that are just starting in their careers.
millennials?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because I had a conversation with a common friend we share in San Francisco, who also told me about her difficulties with millennials, managing millennials at time. Filiberto, do you want to expand on anything?
I think that it's a great point because you have someone who's got potential, no, and can do something, but you need to help them grow.
yes,
And the type of effort, and that's, you can do this coaching and mentoring online versus the coffee conversation or the random question or the random chit chat. They are
Yeah.
substitute, but they need to be designed properly.
Yeah,
It's not one of those things that you can transform from physical to digital by just
yes,
adding a screen to it.
yeah, yeah. I think as managers as well, one of the things that we talk about is um, getting to know our employees, right? It's not just about the professional side, but it's also learning about their families and learning
Mhm.
about their interests and just having a really deep connection with your employees. That has also, I think, demonstrated how important that is to foster that. And you can only do that, like, pre-pandemic, I would travel to Santa Barbara once a month, and it was purely so that I could spend time with people. That's the only reason that I was there, to go and sit down and have a conversation with my VP about topics that I think were worthwhile exploring and talking about. Knocking on the door of our CEO and having a conversation with him about, hey, I think sustainability is important. I would love to tap into your brain and see where your head is on that topic. Sonos, I think, is small enough as a company where we have the ability to tap into that. It's a very friendly environment. And I think those hallway conversations are lost online, right? When you schedule a Zoom meeting, you schedule it with the intent of talking about something very specific. Whereas if I'm in Santa Barbara and I haven't seen a colleague in a while, I'll reach out and say, hey, do you want to grab coffee together? Or I'd love to take you out for lunch. And then you get to know people at a personal level. And I think that defines that creates culture within an organization. And I think so. I feel like company culture is something that is critically important. And I think the only way that you can foster that is by having that in-person piece of it as well.
And I think that's why, by the way, this is the whole notion that Brené Brown and the courage to lead and the empathy
Yeah, I've read all
is
her
not
books.
coming 1 minute too late, to be honest with you.
Yes,
Because
yeah,
it's really building the connection also with international and global. It's really trying to go. It's not that you want to become personal with everybody, but you
yeah,
need to be able to connect on a personal
yes,
level with everybody.
yes. And I think that's as we move towards the situation where some things might be digital, like how do we do that in a digital world, right? How do we make those connections via a screen? That's, I think, going to be the most important area to innovate. How do we move forward knowing that even in our company situation, people have actually moved to different states during COVID, which basically puts them in a remote situation. So how do you still build those personal connections and foster that culture digitally? Are there ways that we can do that? I don't know.
Very clear, and it's also very interesting that you describe, you discuss events from the point of view of the internal value.
Yeah.
Um, where do you see yourself in this world that is that awaits us in 5, 7 years from now?
Yeah.
Because I think in a way the step from color materials and finishing to trends was very natural, very
Yes.
natural to do. We developed from together from color materials and finishing into trend research. The step from trend research to other branches, branding or whatever, is also natural.
Yeah.
The step to product sustainability is quite is linear, but it's more subtle because,
Hmm.
of course, if you are an expert about pigments and about actually the texture of materials and the chemical componentry of materials,
Yeah.
then you are entitled and you are eligible. But what's the next step? Because in a way you spoke a lot like a designer of organizations more than designer of products. So where do you see yourself, and how will events play a role? And in your perspective, also internal teamwork building events.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, personally, I do think we're going to be moving to a hybrid situation. I don't, at a personal level, I don't think I will not go back to what it was pre-pandemic, and I don't think Sonos as an organization will either. It's interesting because we're also tracking what's Facebook doing and what's Google doing, and some of the larger organizations are really pushing employees to come back full time. And it's interesting because we're having conversations internally around offering flexibility for our employees and having that flexibility be an advantage. Like people will want to come work for Sonos because we offer that.
Yeah.
Personally, in my life, I want to have more flexibility as well, right? Whether it means like, do I continue to work Monday to Friday, or can I have more flexibility there as well? Um, I've been in a situation where I've been remote from Sonos from day one, but that also meant that I had a promise that I would show up in Santa Barbara 1 week per month. And I know that that will change going forward, right? So I'm already having conversations with my manager around um, coming to Santa Barbara once a quarter. Like, is it really necessary for me to be there every month? I'm also in a position where part of my team sits in Santa Barbara. So
Mm.
when those physical connections or physical get togethers are required, because we are a hardware group,
Yeah.
so there are physical things that need to be reviewed, they have the ability to be where they need to be in person.
But if you
So,
were, just for sake of extreme synthesis, if you were to decide now that in 7 years, in 10 years, you will be vice president, will it be VP of product sustainability? VP because sustainability has gone up in the,
yeah.
will it be, so instead of one leader, there will be five, or will it be VP of sustainability, looking at all sustainability? Will it be VP of enterprise culture? So you go more in the direction of developing the what you described, the
Hmm.
employer branding, all the aspects of that pertain people. Where would you choose if you had to make an extreme choice, or
If I had
independent
to,
independent advisor or board member of pressure groups and NGOs? I mean, if you had to make one choice.
yeah. I mean, for me, it's really clear that I want to move into the direction of sustainability, right? And that all has to do with circularity. Like just sitting in the last 3 conferences, it's becoming really, really clear to me that the way that we design or the way that we make and market products, and I'm not even just talking about it from a design perspective, but we cannot make, buy, and throw away products anymore, right? I think if this world needs to survive, I think as a human being, we have to change our approach, and we have to move away from the Industrial Revolution as we know it. And we have to get really creative and innovative to think about how we want to make those changes. And I don't think in the IDSA conference, it was very focused on design, but I feel very strongly that design alone cannot drive those changes. We can certainly be at the beginning of the conversation, but I think it needs to be embedded into company culture. And a topic like sustainability needs to live within everybody's job scope. That's just a reality. So that is a space that I feel very strongly about. And I think we also have, our generation also has a responsibility to pass this world along to the next generation, not full of problems, but also finding solutions for that next generation, because they will inherit the planet when we're no longer here. So it's also a personal conviction that I have, that responsibility behind it. So I would see myself as VP of sustainability, the way that you're describing it. Yes. And whether that's a design role or something bigger, I feel like design and business and all these different parts of the organization need to come together in a bigger way. Design is one piece of that puzzle, and we can definitely have influence. But I think, even the way that my manager describes it, there's I think we're 1% of the company, the design team. So how do we as designers influence other parts of the organization? And how do we really bridge those conversations and morph them into other departments?
Well, just a quote before I give the ball back to Filiberto for the final remarks. But Sorab Vosugi, the founder of Ziba Design, made a statement that his job was to design Ziba as an organization. So I think your way of looking at design has evolved a lot into that direction. And actually, when I met you, you were carrying a different surname, because I met you as Kitty Flögels, and
that's true.
Suidman, and you made that's not the only step you made, but you definitely made huge steps in our starting point and in your progress to the position where you are now. And as you call in from America, what's always important is where you will go. And that's very clear, and that's very right, and that's very beautiful. Filiberto, would you like to?
I think in 2007, I said into a meeting of consumer electronics, a product manager at Philips, my vision for the future was that at a certain point we would stop producing hardware, because hardware would be completely embedded in furniture. So probably IKEA would do the hardware part, together with, of course, an engineering. And the real business would actually be the software running and connecting the hardware. I was kicked out of a room, but to be honest with you, 15 years later, I think I was more right than they were. Yeah. Kitty, it was really a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this is the beginning of more opportunities in the future to discuss about events and your work in sustainability and Sonos. Thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to speaking to you in the future.
You're welcome. It was lovely to meet you, by the way. I know that we haven't overlapped, and Marco, it's great to see you again.
We will meet again.
World.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.